Once again in slavery, Yahweh's chosen people have lost the land he promised to them. Under the cruel reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, the last remaining Israelites now wage a desperate struggle for survival in Babylon. Even though they are a pivotal part of Yahweh's mission to reclaim Eden, the Hebrews veered from the one true God and pursued idols. As a consequence, their desire was granted, and Yahweh allowed them to be captured by the nations controlled by these foreign gods. But here in the dark times, they are starting to realize Yahweh has not abandoned them. His commitment to the covenant remains resolute, and he still has a plan to heal humanity. Over the next several centuries, many world empires rise to power and take turns conquering each other, leaving Israel caught in the middle of this turmoil. During this time of chaos, Yahweh ensures some survivors eventually make it back to the Promised Land, proving there still is hope for Eden.
Well, welcome everyone, those of you that are in the room and those of you that are online. Before we get into tonight, I got something special to do that's out of the norm a little bit, but I think it's worthy of doing. And so for those of you that don't know, I like playing ping pong. And I often, and I'm not trying to brag, but I struggle sometimes to find somebody that can beat me. And for a couple weeks now, I've had a challenger who has been a formidable foe. And this last Friday, this person conquered me and was like, I made their dreams come true. And so, I felt a little bit like Disneyland at the time, not going to lie. And so I thought, for a momentous occasion as this, we got to honor it. And so, Chris, I got you something. You got to come up here and get this. I did not let you win. I was trying, and I do want a rematch, but I got something for you. You got to come up here to get it. You got to come earn your winnings. I got you a golden ping pong ball. So that's right. It is not real gold, but yeah. Well, I'm going to work on winning that. So yeah, it was a good day for some humiliation. I thought I had some hope to win, but I didn't. And so, yeah, she got me, and so I'm calling a rematch. So, yeah, you are welcome. Thanks for beating me. Well, we're continuing on in our series, Reclaiming Eden, and going through the Bible chronologically, start to finish, and how the Bible's actually like one continuous story, and it's on this theme of Eden and how God is reclaiming Eden. So, yeah, I invite you to get caught up on the series online if you want to. But yeah, if you're online and you've never visited us, I'd love to have you come visit us in person. If you want to follow along, so we're on part 7 tonight, right? Sermon 1 of 3, I think, on part 7, on Hope for Eden and where we're picking up. If you want to follow along digitally, you can do so. There's sermon notes, and whoops, that's hard on those. Back didn't pop off, though. But yeah, you can follow along digitally online, and there's sermon notes and stuff like that. So I'm going to pray. And then we're going to get into it tonight. So dear Heavenly Father, I pray that as we spend some time tonight looking at your word and how even in the darkest times, there's hope. Even when it seems like we've broken things beyond repair, there's hope. Even when it seems like we've just utterly failed, that you're still at work, God. And we thank you that you care about being in our presence, that you want your creation there with you and all things set right. We thank you that you're still working out Eden. So I pray that as we spend some time looking at your word tonight, that you would guide our thoughts, you would guide our minds, that your spirit and your presence would flood this place, and that we would have an encounter with you that changes our lives. We ask this in your holy, precious name. Amen. So, I don't know if you can see this right here on the clicker. Since I just dropped this becomes a perfect illustration of where I was going to be. Have you guys ever broken anything? Have you? You ever broken this? I'm really hard on things. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I am really hard on things. I am the guy that your insurance agent or my insurance agent just cringes when they hear that phone call, right? What did he do now? Yeah, I don't know why. I don't try to be hard on things, but somehow I am. Somehow I just break things, and I try to be careful, but I break things. But there's simple things like this clicker that I broke that now I'm going to need a piece of tape to hold together. Or there's things that are not so trivial that I've broken. I've broken relationships. I've broken my life. I have broken things that have been so horrifically terrible. It seems like there's just no hope. There's no, like, where do I go from here? Has anybody ever felt that before? Like, you're like, how do I even move forward another day? Like, if you haven't experienced that, just wait, your time's coming, because it's going to. Like, I mean, I know you came to, like, get some hope tonight, and, like, maybe that's, congratulations, you're on your way to break something. Like, that's just the way this world works. Like, sometimes we break things beyond repair. And that's kind of where Israel finds themselves in the situation where they're at in captivity. Like, did they break the promises of God to the place that there is no hope? There is no moving forward. Is it broken beyond repair? But tonight, the big idea I want to point out is that Yahweh will see Eden to completion. You know, we've been tracking Eden from the very beginning of the Scripture all the way through, and how God's working on this sacred space, that God cares about being in perfect relationship with His creation. And so, is there hope for Israel as they're now in exile? When we left 2 weeks ago, we were looking at how God says, you know what, you're chasing after all these gods, these false gods, and so because of it, I'm going to give you your wish, and you're going to get to go into Assyria, and you're going to get to go to Babylon, and you get to be in relationship with these false gods, and it's not going to be what you like, what you think it's going to be like. And so, is it broken beyond repair? And so tonight we're looking at the book of Daniel. We're picking up Israel's story in Babylon. And if you're not familiar with the book of Daniel, it's an awesome book. There's a lot of cool things in it. There's, I called tonight Lion, Fires, and Visions, oh my. Because there's like a lot of really cool stuff in there. And I'm not actually even going to talk about the fires, and that's like a cool story with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm not going to talk about Daniel and the lion's den. Maybe I'll look at that next week some. But like, that's a really cool story too. In fact, if you've never read, here, you guys want to really know of a cool book it's not in the Bible, but it's really cool. It's The Bell and the Dragon. Read that one. It's stories of Daniel in Babylon. It's in a pseudo-figure book. It's like non-canonical, if that makes sense, if you're a nerd into those kinds of things. It's not a biblical book, but it's like more stories of what happens with Daniel in Babylon. That's a really cool book. But like, what we're going to look at tonight is actually makes up half of the book, or more than half of the book, and it's like visions. It's like his dreams that he has, and there's some crazy ones in there. And I've heard a lot of people talk about the dreams and the visions that are in the book of Daniel. And I've heard some kind of wacko themes. I've heard some stuff that's kind of, I think, makes more sense. So we're going to actually dive into it tonight, and why some of these dreams that seem so crazy, so over the top, actually have a lot of hope in them. So we're going to pick up the story just in case you forgot where we're at on the timeline. Again, there's a big version of it over there on the wall. It works chronologically, starting at the beginning of the Bible, all the way around clockwise. Down here at the bottom is year 0, and Jesus' ministry is in there. We're up here in like 2023 AD, last I checked. So we looked at the very beginning, Adam and Eve is where the biblical story picks up. And at that place is where God creates sacred space. It's this place called Eden. It's more than a garden. Eden is not just because there's trees there or there's plants, or like, it's sacred space where God's presence and human's presence and the supernatural realm, the physical realm, it's like, it's in perfection. And we broke that. The supernatural realm broke that. There was a rebellion. And then throughout the rest of the Bible, we've been tracking Eden. So there's actually 3 different places that the Bible talks about how things fall apart. There's the Garden of Eden, there's the flood, and then there's the Tower of Babel, and then from there we followed around. So we've been tracking it all the way around here to the bottom. So this is the line of Jesus through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, all that. And so more recently, we've been looking at the kingdoms, so Saul, David, Solomon, and then the kingdoms of Israel split into the north and the south because they decide that as cool as Yahweh is, he's not cool enough to follow. And so they go after other gods. Their hearts become cold towards Yahweh. The nation splits into the northern and southern tribes. They both completely and utterly rebel against God. The northern tribes disappear to history. Assyria comes in, conquers them, and they disappear forever. And so the hope for Eden is with the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin. But they end up getting conquered by Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar in like 605, 604 AD. He makes some campaigns across there, and then they end up in captivity in Babylon, which is where we're picking up. And there's a guy that's in Babylon who's part of the Israelites, and his name's Daniel, and he has some crazy, arguably scary, terrifying dreams. And so what does it all mean? Where is it going from here? So the visions that Daniel has anybody ever looked at the visions that Daniel has before? Any questions? Yeah. If you haven't, they're pretty crazy. So what they are is there's actually visions of 4 kingdoms that are going to be in here. So if you have your Bibles, we're going to be looking in a couple different chapters. There's Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, 8, 9, like all that. Okay, so we're going to I'm going to jump around a little bit back and forth to try and hopefully show you a 30,000-foot overview of what's going on in these visions. Now, these visions are prophetic, all right? Now, understanding biblical prophecy is important. It is not predicting the future. right? Like sometimes I think like we get this idea of prophecy is like where I'm going to like go get my crystal ball out and I'm going to maybe get the 8-ball, the magic 8-ball, and we shake it up, is it going to rain today? Maybe, right? Like, or, oh yes, should I go bet everything on black? Most likely not. Like we think of prophecy like this, where prophecy, biblical prophecy, isn't predicting the future. It's God giving us insight into what He's going to do. And so it's like if I say that tomorrow, I got to think of something here. Like tomorrow, I'm going to bet, or if I'm going to prophesy that tomorrow, like that window over there is going to get broken at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And then tomorrow, I come over here with a rock and I throw it through the window at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Was I predicting the future, or was I just telling you what my plans were, right? Like, so that's what prophecy is biblical prophecy is God just giving us insight into His plan. And so the prophecy and the visions and the dreams that we're going to see in the book of Daniel are God's revealing the future. Now, the reason that He's doing this is because Israel needs some hope. Israel's in a place where they're wondering if they've broken this so utterly horrific that they can, like, the hope of God's presence with humanity is fully gone or not. And so that's where they're at in this whole realm. Now, last week we looked at how God told the prophet Jeremiah that they're going to be in Israel for 70 years, but He has plans for them, plans to prosper, not to harm you, and why that's not your life verse, right? But we looked at that last week. So now we're going to look at what happens with those 70 years, and unfortunately it turns into 70 sets of 7 years. But yeah, let's 7 years of 7 sets of 70 years. Anyways, so there's 4 kingdoms that are mentioned. So but beforehand, I just want to read you a couple of the dreams. So Daniel chapter 2 is a dream that Nebuchadnezzar has. The king has this one. And he's looking for insight. Now, he has this dream. He calls all his magicians together. He's like, hey, can you guys interpret the dream? And the magicians are like, sure, tell us the dream. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, no, actually, I want to know that you're actually speaking on behalf of God. So you tell me what I dreamed, and then I'll know that your interpretation of it is correct. And they're like, that's crazy. We can't tell you what you dreamed. And he says, great, we'll kill you all. And Daniel finds out that he's going to die because the other people couldn't tell him, the wise men couldn't tell King Nebuchadnezzar what his dream was. And Daniel says, wait, hang on a second, God can interpret dreams. So Daniel prays, and then God gives him what the dream was that Nebuchadnezzar has. And this is the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Verse 31, chapter 2. In your vision, your majesty, this is Daniel speaking, you saw standing before you a huge, shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. The head of the statue was made of fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver, and its belly and its thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. All right, so right out of the gate, there's a statue. Like, what do we do with that? Why is it important that Nebuchadnezzar had a statue? Well, we'll get back to that in a little bit. Keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to look at a dream now that Daniel had. Flip over to Daniel chapter 7. So there's a statue made out of different materials. Daniel chapter 7, there's a dream. So this is Daniel dreaming now, and it's a poetic mirrored image of Daniel chapter 2 in the structure. Daniel 7:2. It says, in my vision that night, this is Daniel, I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning with the surface of a great sea, with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came out of the water, each different than the others. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings, and I watched, and its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground, like a human being, and it was given a human mind. Then I saw a second beast, and it looked like a bear. It was rearing up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And I heard a voice saying to it, get up, devour the flesh of many people. Then the third of these strange beasts appeared, and it looked like a leopard. It had 4 birds' wings on its back, and it had 4 heads. Great authority was given to this beast. And then in my vision that night, I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, and very strong. It devoured and it crushed its victims with huge iron teeth. It trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. And as I was looking at one of the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. And this little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. So, all right, there's a statue made of 4 different materials. There's 4 beasts that come out of the sea. And then there's another dream. Keep that in mind. Chapter 8. Flip over next one. So this is Daniel. He has another vision. Now, these are all tied together. I promise they're going somewhere. Okay? I'm just trying to give you a big picture. Verse 3, 8:3. I looked up and I saw a ram, 2 long horns, standing beside the river. One of the horns was longer than the other, even though it had grown later than the other one. The ram butted everything out of its way, to the west, to the north, to the south, and no one could stand against him or help its victims. He did as he pleased, and he became very great. While I was watching, suddenly a male goat appeared to the west, crossing the land so swiftly and didn't even touch the ground. The goat had one very large horn between its eyes, and it headed to the two-horned ram that I'd seen standing beside the river, rushing at him in rage. The goat charged furiously at the ram and struck him, breaking off both his horns. Now the ram was helpless, and the goat knocked him down and trampled him, and no one could rescue the ram from the goat's power. The goat became very powerful, and then at the height of its power, his large horn was broken off. In the large horn's place grew 4 prominent horns pointing to the 4 directions of the earth. And one of the prominent horns came a small horn whose power was very great, extended towards the south, to the east, towards the glorious land of Israel. Its power reached to the heavens, where it attacked the heavenly army, throwing some of the heavenly beings and some of the stars to the ground and trampling them. It even challenged the commander of heaven's army by canceling the daily sacrifices offered to him and by destroying his temple. The army of heaven was restrained from responding to this rebellion, so the daily sacrifice was halted, and truth was overthrown, and the horn succeeded in everything it did. All right, why am I not hearing any amens, right? Like, hang on a second. Like, you guys act like you're like a little confused here.
Amen.
All right, is the amen because of what the visions are, or is it because you're confused? Like, so first of all, if you're a little confused in this, you're a little bit like, wait, what? That's okay. That's all right. There's a lot of people that are in this realm, and at times I'm here too. But what is going on with these dreams? Did anybody catch what's happening? Does anybody need an interpretation? Right? Like, okay, I'm in the camp with I need an interpretation. Now, fortunately, there is interpretation that's going on, and Gabriel ends up helping out Daniel and understand, and there's more to the dreams that I didn't even read in there. We'll get to in a minute. But there's something exciting happening. It's thrilling. There's something really, really cool, because in those dreams, what you see is a lot of terror, but you actually see a lot of hope. And you see hope actually as represented with the 4 letters that are up here. I don't know if you caught it yet, but this is Babylon. That's the Ishtar Gate. The O is made out of a Persian glass. The P, anybody guess what that is? Greek. And then the E, anybody see what that is? Rome. All right, the Colosseum. So first of all, if you know anything about these nations, there's no hope in them. Right? In fact, they're pretty terrifying, kind of like the dream that Daniel had. Right? Maybe there's some connection there. So what's going on with these dreams? Well, first of all, there's these visions, and they're the same storyline that's being told with these several different visions and these several different dreams. And if you just leave it at the dream and then let yourself come up with the interpretation, you can come up with all kinds of crazy things, and it might even lead you to thinking that the Pope is evil, right? Like that the Pope is going to somehow overdo things. But that's not where the text is going. And so some of you guys just caught the theological joke I threw in there, but yes, it's actually so much more powerful than there. So let's start looking at the visions. Okay, so first of all, there's the statue that's in Daniel chapter 2. That's one I read of the statue with the 4 different metals that are made of the statue. And then there's the beasts, which are in Daniel 7, and then there's a ram and a goat in Daniel chapter 8. Now, it's telling the same story, and it's telling what's going to happen to Daniel, but through studying history, we can actually see what has happened with this. So there's these dreams, and they're telling the story of 4 different kingdoms that are going to happen. So the first one, there's a ram, okay? It has 2 horns. The second horn with the ram and the goat, I should have gone back this way. I should go this way. The statue, first of all, has head of gold, chest of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, and then it has the feet of iron and clay. The beast, then, that's the first, in case you didn't catch it, there's the lion that has eagle's wings. Then there is the bear with ribs in its mouth that's eating something. Then there's a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. And then there's a 10-horned beast with iron teeth. And then, which, by the way, compare that to the 4 beasts of Ezekiel. And then there's the ram and the goat. And the ram has 2 horns. One, the second horn outgrows the first horn, so there's 2 horns. One comes later. It gets bigger and more powerful than the first horn. And then it's shattered by the goat who comes with 1 horn. That horn breaks off, and then it goes into 4. All right, so is anybody familiar with what horns represent in biblical imagery? Any guesses? Governments. It's kingdoms. So you're right. That's like, it represents kingdoms. And so in all of these dreams, there's imagery that is going on. And so it's going somewhere. It's telling us something that is going to happen, all right? And so it's a really good thing like that the Bible actually tells us what these are. We aren't left guessing. We don't have to wonder. So for example, if you go back to Daniel chapter 2 on the statue, it's really cool because Daniel actually tells him. So he says, verse 36, that was the dream. Now tell me now we will tell the king what it means. Your majesty, you are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has given you sovereignty and power, strength and honor. So this is Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar he's talking to. He has made you the ruler over the inhabited world and put all the wild animals and birds under your control. You are the head of gold. So Babylon is the head of gold. After your kingdom comes to an end, another kingdom inferior to yours will rise to take your place. And that kingdom has fallen, yet a third kingdom represented by bronze will come to rule this world. Following that kingdom, there will be a fourth one, strong as iron. That kingdom will smash and crush all its previous empires, just as iron smashes and crushes everything as it strikes. If you start noticing, the fourth kingdom is a little bit stronger, a little bit more powerful, a little bit more terrifying. The feet and toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom will be divided, which, hint, Rome was. Like iron mixed with clay, but it will have some strength of iron. But while some of its parts will be as strong as iron, other parts will be mixed weak as clay. The mixture of the iron and clay will also show that these kingdoms will try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage, but they will not hold together just as iron and clay do not mix. So he's talking about there's kingdoms that are coming, and he tells you it's Babylon, it's Persia, it's Greek, and then it's Rome. All right, so you jump over to Daniel chapter 7, verse 15. The visions explained. I, Daniel, was troubled by all these things I'd seen. The visions terrified me. Yeah, I'd say so. So I approached one of these standing beside the throne, and by the way, those who are standing beside the throne is what I just skipped in there. We'll come back to it. The heavenly being standing beside the throne of God. And asked him what it all meant. He explained it to me like this. These 4 huge beasts represent 4 kingdoms that will rise from the earth. But in the end, the holy people of the Most High will be given the kingdom, and they will rule forever and ever. And then he goes into what's the big deal about the 4th beast. So they're kingdoms that are represented. There's something powerful going on with these kingdoms. Now, so it's a really good thing that the Bible actually tells us what these dreams mean, because otherwise we would come up with some really crazy ideas. And there are a lot of people who have come up with some really crazy ideas. But we can actually study history. We can study where it's going, and we can actually see, I don't think it's as complicated as we tend to make it out to be. So there's 4 kingdoms that come into play here. And so I'll just give you some examples. This isn't an exhaustive list, but how these kingdoms are these representations of the dream. Okay, so the first one is in the 4 kingdoms. The first one's Babylon, which these dates are kind of approximate because they're rising to power and getting conquered in different parts of the land, but approximately, okay? So Babylon, first of all, takes over Israel about 605 BC, and they last about 538 BC. Again, remember BC, the smaller the number, the more recent it is. It's backwards, so it's counting down to 0. So Babylon, 605 to 538 BC. Now Nebuchadnezzar in 605 BC, 604 BC, that's when he comes and he conquers Israel and takes off the captives to Babylon. And he's described as an lion. He's the lion with the eagle wings, or the head of gold. Okay, that's Babylon. That's Nebuchadnezzar up until Belshazzar, which is his son, ends up getting the kingdom taken from him. So that their empire, if you're not familiar with it, here's a picture of it. So the Assyrian Empire is the Babylonian Empire. So this is Israel again. I was having a hard time finding a picture that wasn't blurry, but anyways. So here's modern day Italy, Greek, Rome's over here, where it starts going. Now, if you'll notice, there's Medes and Persians over here, but this is the Babylonian Empire. Here's modern-day Israel. This is Iraq, modern-day Iraq in here. So Babylon is this area over here. So this is where Daniel is at in the Babylonian/Assyrian Empire that goes on. All right, so from there, it continues on with the Media-Persia Empire. So this isn't like media the news station that's telling you to be afraid of everything. This is like the country media, or the Medes and the Persians. So they actually come and they defeat Babylon. So when Daniel's thrown in the lion's den, it's actually not, he's in Babylon, but it's by the Darius the Mede that throws him in. So when the Mede and Persians conquer Babylon, that's who you're looking at. Now, what's interesting with them is they're the bear with the ribs in its mouth. They're the chest of arms and made of silver in the statue dream. And in the dream with the ram and the goat, that's dialing in specifically on Mede, Persia, and then Greece, which is coming next. So the second horn outgrows the first. So remember how there's 2 horns on the ram? That's the Medes and the Persians. So Media was actually bigger than Persia, but Persia ends up outgrowing Medes and actually ends up taking over Media, and they become the predominant nation in that thing. So in Persia, Cyrus, he ends up letting the Jews come home. So when he conquers Babylon in 538, 536 BC, that's 535, that's when he issues a proclamation and lets the Jews go back to Israel at that point in time. But yeah, that's the Medes and the Persians. So their realm, they start off right here, and then the Medes are bigger, the Persians come over, but by the time it's said and done, their whole empire ends up turning into like this big whole Persian empire that's taking over most of the Middle East at that point in time. So that's where that goes to from there. All right, so the next is the Greek Empire. So the Greeks come and they actually defeat Media first, and then they end up defeating Persia. Have any of you guys ever seen the movie like 300? You know what I'm talking about? That's kind of like in this realm right here, 300. So they're the nation that comes in. That's the the goat with the single horn. They come in and they're super strong. Now, there's one particular political ruler that is that single horn. Anybody know who that is by any wild chance? Yeah. Alexander the Great. Anybody heard of Alexander the Great? Alexander the Great, he comes in and he is a terrifying ruler. He comes in fast, he shatters everything, he destroys the Mede-Persian Empire. He like establishes this great rule. He does a lot of things. He's a brutal ruler, but he comes in, and so he is the leopard with the 4 wings and the 4 heads. Now, why is there 4 of those things, or the horn that shatters and it grows into 4 horns? Anybody know? Because Alexander the Great dies, right? And so his kingdom end up getting split over, this is his empire where he takes over. He's the Greek Empire that starts. His empire ends up getting split by his 4 generals that take over. Now, this is important because the area of Alexander the Great, which is over all this, ends up getting split up. Now, Israel is finding themselves caught in the middle of this struggle, this power fight. And so as Alexander the Great, he conquers the Persian Empire, he conquers the Medes Empire, he dies, his 4 generals take over. One of them is the Seleucid Empire. And out of that empire, there's somebody that comes that's struggling with the Jews, and he ends up doing some pretty horrific things in the intertestamental period of time. So what's the dreams that Daniel has going on here? They're from the end of the Old Testament to the beginning of the New Testament. There's 400 years in there. So God's saying, you know what, I get that there's going to be some difficult times for you as Israel, but there is hope coming at the end of this, and it's going somewhere. And so in there, one of the kings that ends up being part of one of the 4 nations of Alexander the Empire, his name is Antiochus Epiphanes, and he actually comes in, and he does some horrific things. He ends up slaughtering a pig in the tabernacle, or in the temple, in about AD 67, and he starts worshiping Zeus and slaughtering pigs in the temple to Zeus, and he outlaws the Jews doing their own sacrifices, which, by the way, the book Maccabees and several other places in Daniel call it the abomination of desolation. The fact that God can't be worshipped in the temple anymore. It's pigs getting slaughtered to Zeus, which violates everything. All right, so there's the Maccabean revolt in this period of time where the Maccabees actually go and they start trying to fight because they're just outraged over everything that's going on. And they get some sort of independence going on. And they're kind of in like this range right here in the biblical timeline between Greek and Rome. And so they get this dynasty that's a few years along, but eventually there's the 4th kingdom, the one that's very terrifying. It's the 4th beast, the strongest out of all of them, the one that has iron in it, and that's Rome. And so Rome comes to power. And so they're the iron legs and feet, but there's clay in there. There's still some weakness that happens. And so what ends up happening historically in 31 BC is Rome finally defeats the last of the Greek holdouts of the 4 generals in Egypt, and now the whole world power is under Roman rule. Rome is in charge of the whole thing. So here is a picture kind of a little bit of the Roman Empire that it continues to grow after this. And so here's Israel. They're caught in the middle of this power struggle, this thing that's happening. And so what you start seeing as the nations start unfolding and the dreams start going through is you start seeing out of all of these nations that there is not a nation, there's not a kingdom that doesn't become a beast. It's not, there's none that are righteous, there are none that that do good. Every nation ultimately becomes a beast, and ultimately a nation that's a beast that is opposing Yahweh. And so the tragedy in all this is that humanity on its own just turns into beasts that are apart from Yahweh. All humanity can do is just rebel. All humanity can do is not restore the sacred space. All humanity can do is become part of the brokenness. And so why is the nations written in hope? Why is, where is the hope in this? Where is the good news in these dreams? Where is the good news in these visions? In fact, all that I'm seeing up to this point is terror, right? Well, finished the visions. Jump back to Daniel chapter 2. After the statue, the end of verse 35. Well, 34. Go 34. So he talks about the different nations and the statues. And then he says, as I watched, a rock was cut from the mountain. But this rock wasn't of human hands. It struck the feet of the iron and clay, smashing them to bits. Then the whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. And then a wind blew them away. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. Wait a second, there's hope. There's this statue that represents these four nations. Something comes and overthrows it. Something that is not made of human hands. Something that the nations of the world can't stand against. The rock knocks down the statue. And in fact, it starts covering the whole earth. Jump over to verse 7, chapter 7. There's more to that dream. So here they are. The fourth nation comes up, and it's boasting arrogantly against the Most High. And verse 9. So these nations are coming up, and when it gets to this point on the verse, on the fourth nation, as this nation looks like it's just going to devour everything, the scene changes from the earthly realm to the heavenly realm. And we go into a courtroom drama that we start seeing. Verse 9, and I watched as thrones were put into place. And the Ancient One, or the Ancient of Days, that's Yahweh, he sits down to judge, and his clothing is white as snow, his hair like purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire. Again, look at how Ezekiel describes the throne of God. And a river of fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. And around him in this courtroom, it says millions of angels ministered to him. Many millions stood to attend him. Like there's millions and millions of hosts of heaven in this heavenly courtroom. And then court began its session, and the books were opened. So as the nations are starting to rise, as these nations are working their way through, and they're killing humanity, they're destroying, and it looks like there's no hope for anything, all of a sudden, court's in session. Verse 11, and I continued to watch because I could hear the little horn's boastful speech. I kept watching until the fourth beast was killed and its body was destroyed by fire. Wait a second. The fourth beast, the strong one, it has an end. It says, then the other three beasts, they had their authority taken away from them, but they were allowed to live a little longer. And then as my vision continued that night, I saw someone like a son of man, or the son of man. Anybody know who takes the title of himself, starts calling him the son of man? It's a specific person. I'll give you a hint. It's around the Roman Empire age. Coming with the clouds of heaven, or coming riding on the clouds of heaven. That's important because that's God language. That's deity language. Who could ride in the clouds? Only God can do that in the Canaanite realm. He approached the Ancient One. He was led into his presence. He was given all authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world. Not just these four, but all nations of the world. So that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. So after these four nations go, the heavenly realm interrupts what's going on earth. In fact, the Ancient of Days sits on his throne and he rules, and he says, you know what? There's something else going on. And the nations are put to a stop in their rebellion. And then there's one like the Son of Man riding on the clouds who comes and he inherits all authority. And he has a rule that will never end. Or you could maybe describe it as a rock that crushes the nations, that covers the whole earth. You go over to the one in verse 8 of the rams, right? They're opposing everything in the heavenly realm. But there is an end to it. I didn't mark it down in here. Uh-oh, I know. It's in there. I'm reading it really fast. I know, find it. Well, you can read it. It's in there. It's in there. Well, yeah. 15. Yeah, that's the whole of it. I was not going to read you the whole explanation because, unless you guys want to do that. Yeah, all right. And so this is the goat and the ram, specifically Mede, Persia, and Alexander the Great. As I, Daniel, was trying to understand the meaning of this vision, someone who looked like a son of man stood in front of me. So this Jesus is here. And I heard a human voice calling out from the river. He's at, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of this vision. So Jesus is there. Jesus tells Gabriel, who's an angel, says, hey, explain to Daniel what's going on. And Gabriel approached this place where I was standing and became so terrified that I fell on my face to the ground. Son of man, he said, you must understand that the events you've seen in your vision relate to the time of the end. The end of Jesus not ruling everything. While he was speaking, I fainted and lay there on the ground, but Gabriel roused me with a touch and helped me to my feet. And then he said, here I am to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. What you have seen pertains to the very end of time, which, by the way, don't read that as a Westerner. Don't read that as somebody in 21st century America. Like, there are many ends of time in Scripture. This is the end of the time of the rule of this kingdom. The two-horned ram represents the kings of Mede, Persia. The shaggy male goat represents the king of Greece. And the large horn between his eyes represents the first king of the Greek Empire. The four prominent horns replace the one horn that shows the Greek Empire will break into four kingdoms, but none as great as the first. Again, that's, Alexander the Great, his four generals. At the end of their rule, when their sin is at its height, a fierce king, a master of intrigue, will rise to power. He'll become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause a shocking amount of destruction and succeed in everything he does. He will destroy powerful leaders and devastate the holy people. He'll be a master of deception, will become arrogant. This is the boastful horn in chapter 7. He will destroy many without warning. He will even take on the prince of princes in battle, which is Jesus. But he will be broken, but not through human power. And then he says that it's going to happen in 7 years, broken half, which, by the way, is later on. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a few months. So, anyway, but here's the hope in this, okay? So first of all humanity turns into beasts apart from Yahweh, but the hope isn't that there's nations that are broken, nations that are evil, because we all know that there's nations that are evil. By the way, we live in a nation that's evil. The real hope is the fact that there is a righteous king who ends the rule of the beast kings, right? Like, this is the hope of the gospel, that Jesus comes in and God interjects into the realm of humanity that's going through. And when it reaches the right time, when the time has come, God says, enough, and he steps into humanity. And the Ancient of Days does something. The Son of Man, Jesus, comes, and he is the rock. He is the one in the courtroom that comes and crushes the nations. He is the one who sets up the eternal kingdom, because about 3 BC is when the king of Eden, he is born. The king who's going to come and ultimately reclaim Eden and everything. He's the one that is the hope. He is the one that is going somewhere. And so this is the beauty of the gospel, that it has happened. It was prophecy to Daniel, but it has happened. The Son of Man has won. And so as Israel is struggling with this whole thing and what's going to happen, did we break this so bad? Is there any hope that's left? There's a truth that I see in here that applies to Israel, but also applies to us now, which is that you can't fail beyond what Yahweh can redeem. You can't sin beyond what God can heal. You can't break something so bad that God can't fix it. See, God stayed loyal to his covenant. God stayed loyal to the people in Israel. God steps in to the story of humanity. He tells them what's going to happen. He says, you know what, during these times, there's some horrific times for the people that are in Israel. There's some horrific persecution that comes for them. But God says, you know what, I'm going to be faithful. There is going to be success at the end. And so God stays loyal to his covenant when the people repented of their sins, because Yahweh still works through our sin and our failures when we repent and ask him to heal us. And so in our lives, when we've broken things beyond what we can fix, when we've broken, which is like everything, right? When we've broken things beyond where there seems to be hope, when it seems like we're in a situation like these nations, there is no hope anywhere. That's where the true hope comes from, is the fact that Jesus has stepped in and he has intervened. There is a story that is so full of hope, that is, Jesus has come and he is reclaiming Eden. And so here's the challenge that I want to challenge us with as we're going through this story. Live as a citizen of the eternal kingdom, right? Like, Jesus has set up this kingdom that has intervened in the story of the national line. Like the best we got apart from Jesus is to try and be part of a nation that rises to power. It's to try and be like the Babylonian nation or the Persian nation or the Greek nation or the Roman nation or the American nation, right? Like, it's to try and be the most powerful nation, because that's all we got apart from Jesus, right? There's many beasts in this nation, in this country, in this world. Like that's part of the storyline of Daniel, is that there's going to be many nations. Now, they're conquered through Jesus, right? Jesus is the King of Kings. He is the eternal nation that is not of this world, that supersedes all nations. But like, if you're not under Jesus, if you're not in the supernatural kingdom that's not of this world, like, the best you got is your American kingdom. The best you got is what you have here. In fact, that's why That's why everybody wants to go out and protest. That's why everybody wants to go out and fight. That's why everybody wants to go and try and get what they can get, is because they don't have an eternal kingdom. But when you realize that Jesus is doing a kingdom that is not of this world, he is the rock not cut by human hands, he's building a kingdom that has no end, right? Like, we don't have to give in to the powers that are over us. We don't have to fight all the things that we naturally want to fight because we don't have to, because Jesus has won. So apart from Jesus, there is no hope. But with Jesus, man, there's all the hope in the world. And so as you live your life as someone who is under the rule of the eternal King. Someone who realizes that there is a nation that is better than all the nations that are here. And come into that nation. If you've never come into that nation through Jesus, man, tonight's a great night to do that. And there are going to be some people over on the side that would love to pray with you in just a minute. I'd love to introduce you to Jesus tonight. I'd love to introduce you to this new nation tonight. But if you are a member of this nation, live like it. Fight for it. Like, recognize that our fight is not with these kingdoms. Our fight is against, is to set the captives free. It's to tell people, hey, you don't have to be captives of this nation anymore, captives of this world anymore, captives of the beast king, because there's a King of Kings who has set everything right. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you that you are the God that is healing everything, that through Jesus there is a kingdom that does not end. And we don't have to try and be under a Babylonian rule, a Persian rule, a Greek rule, a Roman rule, or the American kingdom, God, that we have a kingdom that is better than all of this, a kingdom that has hope, a kingdom that has life, a kingdom that sets the captives free. And so, God, I pray that we would live our lives in this kingdom, that we would make our decisions based on the fact that our identity has changed through the gospel. We thank you that you are the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I pray that as your church, we would live that on a daily basis. And remember that you're loyal to your covenant. You are the healer. You are the only source of hope. And apart from you, we have no hope. But through you, we have the greatest hope ever, that we're in a kingdom that will never end. We ask this in your holy, precious name. Amen.